Hey everybody, it's March 10th, 2019, and this is your episode 175 of At Percussion. My name is Casey Cangelosi, and with me are some of my dear co-hosts, starting with Carly Vigna. How's it going?
Good. Hi, everyone.
And Ben Charles is here. What's up, Ben?
Hey everybody, we're on spring break, so all good here.
Oh, good. My spring break is just ending. This is the last day of it.
I gotcha.
Yeah. How do you feel after your Tarleton Day of Percussion is done?
I feel well rested, but stressed because I have a recital now in a week. So.
Oh, that's right. That's not easy. Well, you guys, I want to tell you a quick fun fact before I introduce our guest. I'm celebrating right now because headline Spotify says that Spotify just discovered heavy metal is more popular than pop music. Does that make any sense to you guys? Aiyun, are you happy about that?
This is a confusion of genre definition, I think.
So, yeah, I think the headline is misleading, but as you read down what they're actually talking about, they say that Spotify has data that shows heavy metal fans are the most loyal listeners of all the genres. So the genres they broke down were metal, pop, folk, country, rock, hip-hop, reggae, jazz, electro dance music, classical, and blues. And they did this little data collection from a whole bunch of countries, and metal was always in the top 5. So with all that combined, they calculated this little chart called Global Spotify Listener Loyalty by genre. And it's a little 10-point bar graph, and metal is a whole 2 points, about 2.5 points above everything else. And none of the others are different from one to the next consecutively by any more than a point. So metal has this very, very high difference of loyal listeners. So it's not the most listened to, but it's the most returned to, the most replayed, and the most, I guess, thoroughly listened to from what I can tell. And they attribute this to the culture, I guess. They say that because metal, since whenever the heck it was invented, it's always had a being rebellious. So the more people say, oh, okay, it's it's built around confrontation, the fans like dig in harder, and there's a backsplash effect to people saying, oh, you shouldn't listen to metal, or metal's bad. People listen to it more. And there's also a historical side to it where the fans supposedly, they say, oh, you like this band? Well, you should really hear where that music came from. So new listeners are always going back into older artists and older bands, as opposed to, say, pop music that's not really in the culture. It's like, oh, well, if you like Lady Gaga, you really need to listen to Madonna. Like, you just don't hear people say that, So anyway, I thought that was a little fun fact.
That's very exciting. So with metal, what's the age group like? Like, are they getting more and more young people involved?
That's another thing. So they have loyal listeners across all the different age groups. That's another reason why. And a lot of the fans who so I liked Metallica in middle school. I don't like them anymore, but there's a whole generation of us who were Metallica fans in middle school, and now it has moved and developed and matured into this other music that's still technically, considered metal, but it sounds really, really different. Like the guitar riffs are more complicated and involved, and they say it's one of the few genres that does that. Unfortunately, classical and jazz are right at the bottom of this loyal listener rating. Which I actually think kind of makes sense, because that's not casual music. I guess jazz could be, but classical music is not casual. You don't just casually I'll just dig my Spotify playlist and my classical music. Like, it takes some, a little more time dedication at least to listen. Anyway, I thought that was fun. Let me introduce Aiyun before I get too crazy off the wrong topic. So.
I don't know real quick. Sorry, Casey. I don't know if you guys saw the image I sent in the chat, but actually stochastic music has quite the exciting young audience there. Yeah, if you want to check out that image.
Are you complicating this whole thing, Ben?
Check out that picture I sent.
Oh, wow. That's very cool. Yeah.
I'm glad you're working hard over there, Ben. That's good. So, y'all,
serious journalism here, yeah.
Guys, she's an acclaimed percussionist and professor at the University of Toronto. She is especially known for her work in percussion theater, new music, and research projects, including Transplanted Roots, which is a percussion research symposium. So, hey and welcome, Aiyun Huang. How you doing?
I'm good. So excited to be doing this. Getting to know you guys a little bit more. That's great.
Yeah, thank you. We're cruising along. How's the weather in Toronto? Assuming you're there right now.
Yeah, today was the first time they went above frozen for probably 2 weeks. So very exciting. We were out for a walk.
Oh, fun. Yeah. I'm here right now too. It's been very, very frigid cold, but it's finally warm today.
Where are you guys based?
Well, I'm down in Miami, where we dipped below 60 for the first time in a while last week.
And I'm in Texas.
Oh, wow. Okay. So very warm.
And I'm in Virginia. Yeah.
Kind of cold, but not really.
Yeah,
right?
Especially not today. Well, you sent us this list of amazing music, and I guess since I'm already talking, I'm going to just tell you I watched this piece called Windward, which was this really beautiful piece with a bass drum, hands, brushes, and projector with, I guess, custom animation. And man, I don't know even where to start. Can you tell us a little about this piece? I thought it was just beautiful, and I really got the sense that you were like, you got to play the role of a god or a creator or something. And I kept getting the hint of like, oh, this piece is about the Big Bang, and there she goes doing like the first Big Bang, and all of a sudden there's like this burst of existence, and the existence particles morphed into a person and then several people, and it was really beautiful.
Well, thank you. This is a collaboration with an American composer, David Bithell. So David is based in Ashland, Oregon. So he teaches at the University of Southern Oregon together with Terry Longshore. So you guys might know him.
Yeah.
David's primarily a composer, but also somebody who is very advanced in the field of music technology. And I really like his work because he's one of the few people who can really sort of integrate technology and creative work together in a way that's very organic. So it's never about the display of the technology. It's still very much more about the creative voice. And so this particular piece that he made for me, it came out of a conversation that I was complaining about how very often when I see works that uses technology, it's often a showcase of what technology can do, and not enough about what the performer can do. And so one of the simple example would be like when you watch a performer playing with video, the video is often so giant that makes the performer look very small. And therefore, everybody's attention will be on the video, and the live performer is sort of put to the side. And I wanted to think of some sort of constraint that will help us to really kind of explore the way that the live performer could interact with technology in a way that's meaningful and would change sort of the power position of the performer from the technology. And so he created this piece using 2 different softwares. So with Max, capturing the sound, and with some sounds being live processing, and some of the sounds are pre-recorded. Then he uses this video software called Unity. So Unity is sort of standard industry software for people who are making video games. And so he he spent the summer actually kind of studying unity, and then he made this piece at the end, and I really like it. Yeah,
I really liked it too. And actually, as I was watching, I thought, oh no, is this going to be one of those pieces where the composer is saying like, hey, look at this way I figured out how to integrate video onto this bass drum as a projected surface, and look at this, like basically this experiment we're going to try. But then after a while it was very clear, like, no, like I'm watching a piece and there's a story here, and it's very, very easy to interpret what's going on. And it's like, cool, yes, thank you. He's not just like, hey, showing off this cool tool he's invented, you know.
Yeah, and he actually made this light bulb. So there's this light bulb that gets attached to the bass drum. So to advance the musical cue, you can either push the pedal or you can pull the light switch. So they both advance the pedal to the next part of the mass. And I think that sort of provides this other layer of theater, you know, like because when the piece opens with me pulling the light switch and then me warming up my hand. So it's almost like gesturing, entering this sort of mystical world. And then the particle appears, then the little man came out, and then there's sort of this story that's being told. So I think that's quite magical there.
Well, it's cool, like all the way till the very end, you know, because of course, if you don't know about this stuff, you're wondering like, how is that done? How is she sequentially, you know, in sync with the video so accurately? And then at the end, like the final, like, how did that happen? The light goes on by itself without you pulling it, which I guess must have been the foot switch.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So there, that was a secret.
Cool. Ben, what do you got there?
So I had a question that, like, every single piece on this list I thought was just fantastic. And I kind of pride myself on being like a rep person that knows a lot of the rep, and I didn't know any of these, and really most of the composers I hadn't even heard of. And by the way, one of the pieces I should mention, Carousel, was being performed by two of the Fujis, who are, I think, along with Keiko Abe, some of the most significant marimba artists to come out of Japan. I can't remember. I think it's. I think there's a mother and two daughters or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is, but anyway, I hate to ask a sort of generic question, Aiyun, but like, what is your source, or how do you discover this sort of repertoire?
Well, friends, yeah, friends. I have friends who tell me. But I actually submitted the list today primarily to talk about some of the Canadian percussion pieces that I really like, and perhaps people haven't heard about it, and I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce them. And I think Michael Osterly's works, he has a bunch of them, and they are all very fantastic. And of course, Carousel, I think it's one of the best pieces that has been introduced to the percussion repertoire really in the last 10 years. So it features a piano in the center, and then surrounding the piano is a vibraphone, a marimba, and a glockenspiel. The marimba part is quite virtuosic. Then the vibraphone part is slightly tricky, and the glockenspiel part is a little bit easier. But together, because also compositionally, but also the way that he has asked the players to set up, he's really sort of trying to see if he can produce a collective sound that having the piano in the center, but then almost being able to have different kind of timbre by having this kind of more, how do you call it? Not a regular chamber music setup, but kind of like a surround setup. This was a commission by one of the leading new music organizations in Canada called Sound Streams Canada. And they regularly commission new works. Other Michael Osterly's percussion pieces, if people would like to check out, He has a piece called California, and it's for 8 people. And this piece is beautiful. It's quite long. He has sort of this kind of post minimalist feel. It's for people who like to sort of meditate while they play. It's very beautiful, kind of soft, sort of evokes the California landscape as you listen to the music. Then there's this piece that he wrote for me maybe like 12 years ago that features 2 marimbas, 2 vibraphones, and glockenspiel solo. And this piece actually uses quarter note glocks. And for people who actually play Roger Chantier, if you want to use your glockenspiels, your quarter note glockenspiels more than one way, then this is a piece that you can check out because those are the quarter tone pitches that he used in this piece.
I think quarter tone Glock would be really useful for pranks in the orchestra pit.
For sure, just to see what people will react to if they will adjust to the quarter tone.
Yeah, that's what they were originally designed for, right?
I think we actually talked to Steve Schick about that, and I floated that same joke, or maybe that was to
Could have been Van Cise, because I know we talked to him about the quarter tone.
I'm glad you mentioned another piece, because wonder, okay, you make this quarter tone instrument for one piece, and then what do you do with it?
That's right.
That does remind me of something. I think I might have mentioned this on the podcast before, but here's a little percussion trivia for you. Do you know who standardized A = 440? Deegan, yeah. So at the turn of the century, people were complaining playing in, opera pits or whatever, that I think it was theater pits, that, the glockenspiel was all out of tune. So he said, all right, well, I'm going to tune my glockenspiels to this, and you're going to tune to that. So we have John Calhoun Deegan to thank for A = 40.
I think I do remember you saying that. Yeah. That's very out of my character to know something like that. In fact, I feel like a dweeb. Carly, do you have a question for Aiyun there?
I do. Aiyun, what strikes me about your career is that it's been full of several self-driven projects, like Transplanted Roots, and like I saw in your bio about the Center for Brain, Performance, and Music Creation, and so many collaborations with artists and with composers. So I'm wondering, do you have any advice about kind of staying on top of so many different projects and also just creating so much personally?
I think it's not easy. I think sometimes I really struggle with the various things I have to do. I try to do only like 2 things at a time. So I put them on rotation. So for example, sometimes I publish articles and I find that switching the gear between, for example, playing and writing to be difficult. I mean, I don't know if any of you feels that way. It's like sure. When you have to do scholarship or you have to do a lot of sort of academic research, it's like it uses a different part of the brain than the one that you use in the practice room. Sure. And it's almost like, I find the creative brain to be non-judgmental. Like if you want to create something, you kind of go with intuition. That's like the main driver for me. And a lot of the stuff, you will process it, but you process it in a way that's very sort of reflective, very intuitive. You are not judging like this is bad. It's like, I like this, I'm going to go with this. And that's all part of sort of this more organic way of developing one's performance. But when it comes to do things that are more academic or more sort of hardcore research-based projects, then the way to think about the issues, it's quite different. So for me, when I had to switch gear, going from one mode to the other, it usually takes about 2 weeks to switch over. And once I switch over, I feel okay. But then like in the middle period, I often feel like that I cannot do either of them very well. So there's a little bit of flux going on. But what I find very interesting with what I do is that I constantly meet people who are very good at what they do, and my what's driving me inside is sort of my desire to be able to like engage with different people that I meet. So whether if they are composers, performers, or scientists, or people who are doing technology, if I find them to be interesting human beings, I often say, "Oh, let's try to make a project together. Let's try to do something together." Then there's like different processes that happens depending on collaborators' home discipline. But then eventually, if you want something to happen enough, you can find a common ground, and that can be a very interesting process. I like that. Yeah. One thing that I would talk about a little bit, if you don't mind plug me, I'm going to plug a little bit about Transplanted Roots, because it's happening in 2019. So in 2015, during my sabbatical, so I was a little bit bored during my sabbatical because I was only working for myself. I wasn't working for many other things anymore, and I was kind of used to doing like 3 people's job before I took my sabbatical. So during my sabbatical, in the first part, I actually got certified and as a yoga teacher during the first part of my sabbatical. Then while I was getting training for yoga, so a lot of creative ideas actually comes to me during my yoga practice. So when I'm doing downward facing dog or during one of the very hard asanas, I would often have these crazy ideas that would just come into my brain. And if I have any roadblocks, well, you do yoga. Yeah. So that's when kind of creative and crazy ideas will come into my mind. And if they repeatedly come into my mind, then I will address them. So during my sabbatical, I decided that I wanted to start a symposium for percussion that really kind of touches on sort of creative research and how to integrate the different parts of the pieces that we work on these days. Not just what I do, but what you guys all do, and find a way to find sort of different outlets for people who are doing different things, for people to engage together. And so that's how Transplanted Roots was born. So I hosted the first edition, and very luckily, when I proposed the idea, many people liked this idea. So after the first one happened in 2015, Vanessa Tomlinson took it up, and she hosted 2017. And then this fall, in September, the third edition will take place in Guanajuato, Mexico. So Guanajuato, Mexico, for those who have not been, is a fantastic UNESCO heritage site. It's the birthplace of Diego Rivera. It's the home of Festival Cervantino. The Cervantino, this festival, is the largest art festival in Central and South America. And it runs for 3 weeks in October. This place sizzles with culture, just all kind of music, dance, art, everywhere. So this is where we're going in September.
Wow, cool.
Nice.
Congratulations. What should people expect to see? Because there's so many, we call them festivals, we call them conferences, we call them symposiums. What should our listeners expect to see when they get there?
Well, we haven't officially the application yet. So it would depend on who propose to present and who gets selected. But it's a 2.5 day symposium that opens on Thursday and closes at the end of Saturday. And there are 3 types of events that gets programmed. So you can either do paper presentation, you can do lecture recital, or you can pitch to do concerts. So from short performances of one work to larger works. So depending on what's proposed, we will be able to announce the complete program in early summer.
This sort of sounds like how PASIC started.
Is it true?
Yeah. I mean, that's what everyone has told us, is that it started as a, the focus day, was how it started, and that everything else is kind of built around focus day, and that's why they still have focus day. And like you kind of described, you can apply to do one piece, you can apply to do a whole concert, you can apply to do a paper presentation. So that sounds really great.
So is there a theme for this year's Transplanted Roots?
Yes, we're working on the exact wording as we speak. So it will be announced probably by March 15th. Yeah.
Well,
great.
Since Casey did bring up Focus Day, I know a few years ago, Aiyun, you were I can't remember what they call it, the curator basically for Focus Day. And I know you performed Aphasia on that, right?
No,
Mark Applebaum?
Casey played Aphasia.
Casey played Aphasia. No, I didn't.
You didn't play No, it was not me. It was somebody else.
Well, I know I saw online Aphasia is in your repertoire, so yeah. I've played Aphasia, I've recorded it, and I'm actually performing it on my recital in a little over a week. So I was wondering, I always like to ask people, because it's such a unique piece, could you tell us about your experience with that piece?
Well, I know Mark Applebaum very well. So when I was learning this piece, I had to learn it a little bit in a hurry. And it was not long after the piece was written. Maybe I played it in like 2012, I think. The piece was written in 2010. So when I was learning this piece, I would laugh out loud a lot, because Mark has a very funny sense of humor. So then when I'm reading all these different kind of annotations that he wrote about the pictogram, I can just imagine like how he would say them. Like his twisted sense of humor, his way of connecting the dots. It's not really like simple, but when you know him, you just think this is hilarious. I mean, Mark and I co-hosted a festival in 2010. So this was for UCSD. We both went to UCSD. He was ahead of me, and I think in 2010 it was the UCSD department having its 50th anniversary. So we co-hosted this festival with Michael Disson and Sharok. So another composer and a music tech person, and every time when Mark would write an email to the group, everybody would be laughing out loud. He just has this way about dealing with situations, either if it's like in academic settings or through his art. It's very personal and just engages me in a very deep way.
What kind of product does he put in his hair, do you think? Like to get that lift?
To get that lift.
Because that's a very specific lift. I don't think that's real.
That lift, it's very special. I agree. And I mean, that's like gold for him, isn't it? Like, he loves his hair, and we all love his hair. And also his like purple jacket. He wears this purple jacket and the pink shirt.
He's such a
Someone once commented that he looks like Otto, the bus driver from The Simpsons, which is fairly accurate.
Oh, for sure. Well, while you mentioned aphasia, I was thinking we'd probably ask this question a little later, but I think you could ask the same thing about aphasia. We had a question from Facebook from William Brown. William, thanks for the question. He asks, how do you approach the memorization of lengthy pieces like the hour-long Stuart Saunders Smith piece you recently did? But I think the same question might apply to a piece like aphasia, right?
Right. I think with aphasia, well, actually with most pieces, if I have to play from memory, I tend to study the score quite a bit. And in order for me to feel secure to play it from memory, I usually have to be able to recall where the music is on the page.
Mm-hmm. So like photographic memory.
Yeah, I will have to be able to reconstruct the score in the brain. And so if I'm able to do that, then I know that I can play it well.
Okay.
I tend not to do so well with only muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you think people can develop? Like if talking about a photographic memory, is that something you've learned to do?
I definitely think I consciously cultivated that.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, when I was a little kid, I used to play the piano. And this is where I realized I couldn't rely on my muscle memory. So when I was a kid, one time I had to play an exam on the piano, and I was learning this sonatina by Ravel. I went up to the piano for the exam, and I sat down, and I remember, well, this is for 35 years ago. I got up there, and I was like, I do not remember bar 1 and bar 2, but I remember bar 3. So I sat there for a while, and I'm like, well, I still don't remember bar 1 and bar 2. I mean, I know the pieces in 4/8. So I had to play 8 notes in the first bar and 8 notes in the second bar. And I just don't know what they are. And I think there are 2 sharps in the staff. So I decided to make up the chords, and I started the piece at bar 3. So this is one of my earliest memory, knowing that if I just went by muscle memory, something may go really wrong during the show. And I think I started thinking about how to perform from memory more in undergraduate. But then in graduate school, because I study with Steve Schick, so Steve is such a has such phenomenal ability to memorize non-pitch material. See, a lot of people can play very well from memory when it comes to pitch. But when it comes to multi-percussion, actually very few people can memorize things as well, as reliable, and being able to recall to such an accuracy as Steve does. And go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just because you mentioned Steve, do you know if he memorizes the Sonat?
Yeah.
He memorizes it. Do you know, does he do the whole thing?
Yeah.
Wow.
He does the whole thing from memory. Yeah. And we recently worked together, and he memorized a new piece by Roger Reynolds, 35 minutes. Yeah. It's very impressive what he can do. Yeah. Yeah.
Understatement.
Yeah. Yes. So I think because I had him as a model when I was a graduate student, this also kind of helped me to construct different strategies.
I was going to say, Morris Palter also is a Steve Schick student, and he did a great masterclass once on how to memorize. And he did start with talking a little about Steve Schick, and also just I guess he used rebonds as his example, but it didn't seem like there was some magic trick or that you have to be some photo
Yeah.
photo memory.
Carly and I actually saw Morris talk about memorizing Ray-Bons, and it seems for him it's a very aural thing, like he can sing the melody. But when I think about famous memorizers in the percussion world, I mean Steve Schick, and Steve talks about it in his book. And for Steve, he talks about it like the piece becomes a dance, and he like remembers the motions. And actually, when I watch Steve Schick play, he does a lot of sort of interesting preparations for things that I think probably enhance that. And the other one I can think of is Keiko Abe, who, reading the bio about her, I mean, she just has an unbelievable, unreal visual memory.
Right.
And whenever we get into like the memorization discussion, it reminds me, I had a lesson with Mark Ford one time, and Mark was saying that he had just done like a day of percussion thing with Steve Schick, and someone asked him, well, how do you memorize pieces like, Safa? How do you memorize Safa? And in his completely honest, not sarcastic tone, Steve just said, well, I start with the first note, and then I go into the second note, and then subsequently I move on to memorizing the third note, and the fourth note, and the fifth note until I get to the end of the piece. And it's like, like we always want to find out what the magic trick is. But I mean, I think some people probably have a disposition for memorizing music better than others. And I think that some people memorize it physically, what we would call muscle memory. I think some people memorize it orally. I think some people memorize it visually, either visualizing the page or visualizing the marimba or the multi setup, whatever. But yeah, it's like one of those things. I think people always want the magic pill. And then there are great musicians. I can think of Riccardo Muti, who is the conductor of the Chicago Symphony, does not memorize anything, conducts Beethoven 9 from the score in front of the orchestra. And Dave Herbert talks about how great it is watching him read the music. So I think as percussionists, we sort of romanticize memorization when, I mean, it is a great skill to have, don't get me wrong, but memory can fail. And if your memory is one that is prone to failing, I would rather see you read a piece. And we have such wonderful solutions now with like iPads and page turn pedals that I completely unobstruct the music. And I think a lot of Steve Schick's memorization came out of practicality, that he can't have a 35-minute.
Are you a doctoral student right now?
No, Carly and I both did our doctorates with SVED at Miami.
So you're teaching at Texas?
Yes, yeah.
I'm actually wearing Ben's shirt right here.
Yeah, just had Casey as a guest artist last week.
Haven't taken it off, Ben.
Very nice.
Still wearing it a week later.
That's very cool.
But so before I cut out, did I get to the end of that statement about Steve memorized pieces out of necessity?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was
that was
and I was almost convinced. Okay, that's it. I'm gonna memorize everything from now on. But you squashed that, so I'm not gonna.
So, do you guys play from memory?
Sometimes, yeah, of course. Yeah, I really prefer to. If I can really get that confidence.
Yeah, for me, you talked about non-pitched. Yeah, I mean, keyboard stuff usually, yes. I remember like my first multi-piece during my master's degree was Ray-Bons, and I memorized about half of Ray-Bons A, and at that point I could play the whole piece reading it, and I had other things to get to, so it was sort of like a question of economy. Do I spend all my time trying to memorize this, or do I get my whole recital prepped? And I did the second one. I've of course Aphasia for memory, and I've done some like Stop Speaking by Andy Akiho for memory. So I have done non-pitched for memory, but yeah, it's definitely more taxing for me than memorizing a marimba solo.
Yeah, it's different. I'm pretty much the same. For a while, actually, I avoided memorizing anything because of a traumatic piano experience when I was very young.
I also, I was there to witness Carly when Svet was like, you need to memorize this. And Carly was like, I can't.
and I did it.
You did it. Yes.
I often look at, Ben said, use Safa as an example. Like, how do you memorize something like Safa? And I do really understand that. Well, you start with the first note and then the second note, and and then you can study and you can look at bigger structures and think that way. I also just worry. While I was visiting with Ben, we were talking about this. I kind of worry that time in my life might be over. Like, will we ever have time to tackle that again?
To
Because
learn
the
Asafa, yeah.
solution. I mean, I know the solution is like, well, you have to put the time in, or like to do the Carl Schwitter's Ursonaut. Like, I would love to do that. I would really like to memorize that, and I think I could, given enough time, and that might just be okay. You can still do it. You just have to. It's not going to be a 1 year project. It's going to be a 3 year project now to get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think sabbatical is a big venue for that. And then I think also hearing Morris Poulter talk about bone alphabet, well, Steve Schick also for that matter, like bone alphabet's a piece that you learn, that much of every single day for as long as it takes. You don't have a deadline. You just learn a little bit of it every single day,
Yeah, that's encouraging. Yeah. Well, wow, great stuff. Carly, you put some feelers out on a question you had to some of our Facebook community, and I think you got a lot of answers back. It was something about what maybe we didn't learn in college that we wish we had, and I think you were thinking about tax season too.
Yep.
Is that right?
It's looming on the horizon for most of us, unless
such a
anybody's
drag.
a go-getter and already got it done. But yeah, so I posted earlier this week about what we wish we learned in college. And what I found is most of the responses didn't have anything to do with playing. Seems like generally we're doing okay on that front, but most of it had to do with the business side of things, like the practical side of being a musician. Some people posted about networking, how do you find work? How do you keep work? That sort of thing. Marketing, especially on social media. Some people posted about equipment, like knowing what to get and when, and also maintaining equipment and purchasing equipment. And some people posted about career paths, like kind of managing different aspects of a solo career. Somebody mentioned paving your own path versus following in the footsteps of teachers. But the biggest thing for me, and what I'm prepared to talk about a little bit with you guys today, is taxes, because that deadline is coming up. So what I do want to say is I'm not a tax professional. I'm not a financial advisor, but I've figured out a little bit more about what to do with taxes year by year over the last 15 years or so. So basically what we do as musicians, there's two main categories of work that we do. You're either a W-2 employee or you're a 1099 independent contractor. An example of when musicians are W-2 employees usually is if you're in a university, you're in a full-time orchestra, and sometimes part-time work in schools or in orchestras, they might consider you an employee. And the benefit there is that the employer is contributing to your taxes, your Social Security. They split the cost with you. When you're a 1099 independent contractor, you're responsible for all of your taxes. And this is what we get most of the time for freelance work, performing, and most freelance teaching jobs, adjunct positions, and anything kind of in that realm. And also for private studio teaching, if you're teaching students, and they're not going through a school or anything, they're just coming to you, falls under that. And of course, then you have the advantage, you can write off expenses, which is a whole other category and thing that we can talk about. Some things changed recently with the new tax laws, and I won't get too in depth, but one of the biggest things is that if you are a W-2 employee now for this past tax year, you can't deduct itemized expenses because the standard deduction was raised, and just everything's kind of changed there. But if you have 1099 income, you can deduct expenses against that. And most of us, even if you have a full-time W-2 job, you're also doing plenty of other musical work. So some people are getting panicky and saying, oh, we can't deduct expenses anymore, but most of us really can, unless you have one job and that's it. So I'll list a couple of expenses that we can deduct that it makes a lot of sense to, and I'm sure I'll miss some. But this is a good place to get started. And, musicians are creative, and some of us come up with very creative expenses as well. The one really big one is mileage. Every time you drive from point A to point B, if it's for 1099 employment, you can deduct that with the standard mileage rate. Of course, tolls, parking, if you're taking public transportation, airline tickets, anything related to transportation. Meals, if they're business related, instrument purchases, supplies of sticks and mallets and music, insurance for your instrument. If you have a home office, like a practice space or area where you teach students, and then all the expenses related to that, including like home insurance, even your utilities, like a portion of it. Professional organizations like your PAS membership, going to PASIC, of course, business cards, website, any other kind of promotion, uniforms like concert, performance clothes. You can deduct a portion of your phone and your internet bill, whatever portion you estimate that you use it for. If you rent a studio, if you have office supplies, paper, ink, printers, anything like that. If you're updating your music library, you're buying CDs and DVDs, or you go to concerts, Spotify subscription. So that's a lot of what I deduct. But I think, for us musicians, music is our lives and it's our livelihood. So there's a lot that we spend money on that is work related. But also, we might think like, oh, I'm going to hear Chicago Symphony for fun, but it's also informing our work and kind of market research in a sense. So 2 pieces of advice that I have. One is don't procrastinate, because most of us have probably been there on April 14th or April 17th or even later. And also keep a log of all your miles, keep all your receipts. What I do is I just have a big envelope, and that's where receipts go the whole year. And then I log them in the computer through the years I have time. But do yourself a favor and don't put it off.
Wow, yeah, really, really good, Carly, for sure. Something I would add is, so to anyone who's like really new at this, just to hopefully not sound too basic, but the reason you want to keep your receipts is because you need them if you get audited. So what a CPA or like H&R Block or even like TurboTax will tell you is these have to be expenses you can account for. So you just hang on to it, you keep it all in one spot, because a lot of people, they just like estimate everything and just hope they don't get audited, and the odds are you won't get audited. But something I know, because I've talked to, of course, a lot of musicians about this, and I think something that a good idea is you're not just trying to not pay the least amount of taxes, you're trying to keep money. So paying taxes can be a good thing. A lot of people just want to like get paid under the table, not report 1099 income, not get anything on a 1099. But someday you may need to show your income because you want to get approved for a loan, for a car or a house or something. So like you don't need to try to hide your income, because the deal you get on that loan 10 years down the road, you may end up making more money on the better deal than the little bit extra you had to pay in taxes. Another common mistake, I think, like Carly said, is when you write off your expenses, people say like, oh, I got to come up with more expenses. So they'll do stuff like, instead of buying this microphone I have right here in front of me, which costs, $50, I'll say, well, it's a tax write-off. I can write it off. I'm going to buy a $400 microphone. That's a mistake. If you don't need a $400 microphone, don't buy it. Because sure, that will save you a little bit of money in taxes, but it won't save you $400. It's not a dollar for dollar exchange. And I've heard a lot of musicians kind of go crazy with this on meals on the road and with like first class tickets. Like, hey, it's a tax write-off. It's like, right, it's a tax write-off, and you will pay less taxes, but you will take home less money. You will take home far less money than you will pay in taxes. So I think it's very, very easy to like pigeonhole taxes like, oh, that's the enemy. My ultimate goal should be to pay the least amount of taxes possible. It's like, well, yeah, you want to pay less taxes, but ultimately you want to make money. That's the...
It sounds like that's just how Laurel convinced you to buy first class plane tickets to PASIC.
No, man.
Oh, it's a tax write-off. Yeah. No,
Oh, she's better than I am. I'm saying like, oh yeah, let's like upgrade. We want to make sure we're comfortable. She's like, no, we gotta. She's way more disciplined than I am about it.
well, one thing that actually, and I hope Casey doesn't mind me saying this. Casey and I were talking about this sort of stuff when he was here a week ago.
I mind.
And Casey, I was asking him some questions about his publishing business, and he was like, I think if you have your own sort of publishing business or something like that, part of the key is to actually make sure that you're charging enough for your product, because a score probably costs $1 to print and you're going to sell it for, let's say $15 or something. But Casey was saying, like, obviously the goal in selling something is ultimately to make money. And Casey was saying with his like small business, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, well, buy a printer, and then it's a tax write-off, so you don't get taxed on that portion." And Casey was saying he has to pay so much in taxes on his like small business, but it's like, yeah, you have to pay taxes if you want to actually make money. The goal of his publication company is not to buy printers; it's to make a little bit of money on the side.
Right. No, yeah, thanks for sharing that. And a lot of people say that, like, oh, well, the way you don't pay taxes is you reinvest in your business. You like reinvest it. It's like, wait, that offset would be so big that you wouldn't take home any money. It's smarter to pay some taxes and take money home. And that's another one. I've talked to other friends who self-publish, and they're always trying to get their expenses higher. And yeah, great. Do like as much honest expense work as you can so you can offset it, but it's not a good idea to try to fabricate anything, because if you get caught, it would be so bad. But then also like don't try to inflate by buying stuff you don't need. That's just not money you're going to keep. It'd be better to keep money.
Well, it's any expenses is money straight out of your pocket.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's not that's deducted from the taxes you owe. It's just deducted from the money that you're earning. You're taxed on your profit. So.
Yeah, so exactly. So just to be like absolutely clear, $10 of expenses is not $10 you're not paying in taxes. Yeah, it's a much smaller percent of $10 spent and if this stuff is like, hard to grasp and you wonder, like Carly said, you can deduct a portion of your home studio, your home office, you can deduct a portion of your cell phone bill. Just go to H&R Block once and have them do it for you. Because I've done it through H&R Block. We have a private CPA now. I've done it myself. I've done it through TurboTax. It like always comes out about the same. And I've never seen anyone teach me like some amazing trick to save tons of money. Like this, I think the good solution is, well, try to make more money so it's not as painful when you have to pay taxes. And then really the other solutions, like, okay, I see, where can you hide money or shelter money, as they call it? And the truth is there's just not that many clever things to do. And that's why people get illegal and they start sheltering money in offshore places. And yeah, obviously none of us would need to do that.
Well, one other thing that I should mention that people who have a lot of 1099 income should do if you're consistently having a large profit or taxable profit is you should be paying quarterly taxes every 3 months. You send a check to the IRS. And if you don't do that, you just get a penalty at the end of the year. So it's worthwhile.
And then you also don't get that one big hit come tax
right.
time. Because a lot of people... Yeah, a lot of people behave according to that hit, because people will say, okay, if you can come in under that penalty, it's better to keep your money as long as you can, because you're earning interest, you're able to put that money in, say, investments or something, and the more time you have with money in your hands, the better. So if you can come in under that penalty, great, don't pay quarterly. But of course, like the hit is always a drag because you have to pay it all at once. And then, of course, you avoid the penalty if you're going to make enough to be penalized. Yeah, and again, like it's all confusing, just go to H&R Block once and they'll give you all the papers, all the forms. You can see exactly how they fill them out. You can see that they filled out, a Schedule C for this extra income. They cared about your 1099s, but they didn't care about this other thing you saved. And you just kind of like make mental note. They'll give you a folder with it all finished, and you can literally do it yourself after that. So once you see it done right once.
You should keep your receipts for 7 years.
I know people say, like, I saw something online that said 2 years, and I thought, what? No, that's not
Oh.
nearly long enough. Yeah, just like keep them like for as long as you can put up with it.
For people who travel a lot, you can also consider taking the allowance, the daily allowance. So the Federal has a different per diem deduction that you can use for either domestic or international. So if you use the per diem, you only need to save your boarding passes.
Oh, that's good. No
Because
receipts then.
you have the proof that you were away, and then you just need to save the boarding passes in case that you can't keep track of all your meal receipts. If you have the travel proof, you can deduct it per diem.
A decent little place to start if anyone's interested is musictax.com, and I would just look at the client worksheet. So this is a CPA that specializes in doing this for musicians. I haven't used this person. It's just something I bumped into while I was thinking about this. And this person says, here are downloadable client worksheets for your deductions in both PDF and Excel format. And the ones they list is Schedule C1 business expenses, Schedule C2, Schedule A, Schedule H.O, which is home office workspace schedule, and Schedule E, rental property. So that I think is really helpful, just knowing that those are the forms you could focus on or potentially use. Because if you just start with like the whatever .gov site, there are just so many forms. I mean, the taxes are just so complicated, especially if you just kind of, if you're trying to hunt around in the dark. So that might be a nice place to start.
Yeah, I can say I've also always used TurboTax, and you know, they kind of walk you through. You have to upgrade. You can't use the free one, but they walk you through all the different things, all different categories to help you think of things that you didn't even think of.
I like TurboTax a lot.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, was there anything else y'all wish college had taught you? I was actually thinking about that, thinking I was really happy with everything I learned. I mean, there's always some, of course, topic. I wish I had learned more about this composer or that style of music, but I think that's just expected. You know, there's just you're never going to get
one of the most surprisingly useful classes we had at Miami, where there was a class called, I think it's called Teaching Music in College or something like that, and it was like one of those classes. It was like 6 p.m. on Tuesday or something. You just dreaded going to, but they went over like CVs and cover letters and like how to apply and some stuff about interviews. So yeah, it was called Teaching Music in College, but it was really more of like getting a college job. And yeah, that class definitely was very useful.
Yeah, developing a syllabus. We did a lot.
Yeah.
I noticed there were a couple people saying like how to utilize social media more. One person mentioned the relationship of performer to presenter to management and like what that looks like. It sounds like it's kind of music industry related stuff. What do you guys think about that? I know I've talked about this before, like my feelings of like should website building be somewhere in the curriculum? So you probably know.
I'm always kind of like weirded out by like I guess it has to do with your career path, but I don't think having an Instagram account with 1,000 followers is going to get you anywhere in academia, which it's like the the area that all of us have gone into. I'm sure, I mean, it's useful for someone, especially like maybe a soloist or something like that. Like I know when Dmitry Nilov that we had on a few episodes ago won the CAG competition, like they were like telling him how to run his Instagram account basically. But I think like, yeah, a lot of it, like it's like just focus on your craft and your sort of traditional business skills before you start worrying about your Instagram account or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think I want to be learning that in those 4 years. I feel like it's something that, like I said before, this is something anyone can learn to do, and it's abundantly easy to find how to do it.
I will say though that I guess along the same lines, the most important, I don't even know if it's considered social media, but the most important media thing online to me is YouTube, because if you apply to a college job, you have to have YouTube recordings. And yeah, like I know Casey, you sort of got your start as a YouTube percussionist, it seems. So that's definitely a big deal.
Just like Justin Bieber.
Yeah.
That's the same.
No, I'm not joking. Tom Bird actually called you the Justin Bieber of the percussion world.
I know, and I know he said that probably in front of a bunch of serious people and big PASIC crowd or something embarrassing.
It was an FAU clinic, but I'm sure he said it more than once. Yeah.
Well, it is a weird thing because I always am pushing my students, hey, like record yourself, make videos. You really, really need to do that. And I think they get discouraged because they do. I mean, it's such backbreaking hard work. And then they do it, and a year goes by, and they say, like, I have 50 views. Like, this isn't working for me the way it worked for you and Justin Bieber, Casey. I'm joking there, but and I think they're right. It's like, yeah, it has kind of, if you miss the wave, it doesn't have the same effect as it used to. But I think, Ben, you're absolutely right. When someone does look you up, there's kind of a new expectation. Like they do need to see those things. Because, yeah, we all know there are people in really, really great places in the field, both academic and just the straight music side, that, yeah, I mean, they have these like really pitiful little YouTube accounts, and it's fine. They're doing great. So yeah, you're right. Aiyun, are we close? What do you think? Are we
Well, are we talking about like for undergraduate or for graduate?
I think we're talking about undergraduate. Well, I don't know, Carly. You asked the question.
Could be either.
Yeah.
Some of us spent a lot of years in school, so.
Yeah, because I think what will be missing for an undergrad may be quite different from what will be missing for a graduate student, I think.
Yeah.
If I think about myself, I wish people had taught me how to network a little bit more when I was really young, than when I was an undergrad. I sort of I was hiding in the practice room all throughout my undergrad. I never really had a drink. I mean, I'm allergic to alcohol, but just the concept that to network or to socialize is actually a very big part of building a career that was that didn't occur to me until much later on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think for graduate students, it's harder to pin down what will be missing because everybody's experience is so different by the time you get to graduate school. Yeah. But just also like with the time, it's hard for me to know, like to be able to articulate what my undergraduate students will be missing. Because if I thought they were missing something, I would do something about it immediately. But so I wouldn't be the one that could tell what's missing in my program right now.
Right.
But they could tell me.
Well, something like the networking, like how to network, I can imagine, yeah, sure, we're going to do a module on that in a specific class. And you guys have heard me gripe about this before. I worry that people are changing curriculum that we know works in favor of, okay, we're going to take a whole like 3-week period out of this one class and talk about, say, networking. Whereas I think it's great, man. Take an hour in studio class or take the whole 2-hour studio class and, yeah, do a presentation on networking, sure. But I feel like it's a hard thing to teach because it's sort of like teaching how to teach. That's very challenging, and we try to do that all the time because it's so much about your personality. It's like, how do you teach someone something that hopefully they've been working on kind of their whole life? So I feel like teaching them how to network, I bet we do all do that just by interacting with them. And like you said, go have a drink. It's like, well, if you like hang out with your students and they see how you work and they see how you operate, and hopefully they watch this podcast and they see how we're talking to each other in a collegial, friendly way. Like, I guess like hopefully that just eventually like seeps into them. They kind of see like, okay, so this is kind of how maybe I need to be. And I think that's great. That's kind of the way to do it. Rather than, okay, we need to make a class on the networking or something. And a lot of people are really for that. And I guess I'm not for it.
That Casey just reminds me, if I remember at UNT, one of the band directors said that they had talked one time about, oh, we should have a class for rehearsal skills, and we'll talk about how to rehearse. And then they were like, wait a second, that's why we have like wind ensemble.
Right.
That's what that class is.
Right. Hopefully that rubs off of them. If you're having just good rehearsals, they pick up on that. That's one of those.
Yeah. And I mean, like in lessons, I mean, I have one student who has like severe difficulties with keeping communication professional, which Casey, you probably know who I'm talking about. But yeah, it's like you have to learn that sort of as an adjacent thing to other things. It's not something you can have a class on how to communicate professionally, you know?
And like Aiyun said, it's going to be a case by case, because that student has this challenge, this other student has this other challenge, and yeah.
Well, I was thinking about when you mentioned what might be lacking from graduate students, and I have a question in dealing with especially graduate students. How do you balance encouraging students to be well-rounded as percussionists with also like specializing in what they really want to focus on in their careers?
I also think that's a little bit difficult and has to be case by case. So like here, if we were to look at the job market a little bit, just in terms of where things happen and where things might move towards, of course you have the traditional jobs, perhaps like my job. My job will be a traditional job where you run a percussion program. Then you will have several adjuncts teaching some of the fields that are highly specialized. But very often now, when you see the job descriptions, they are looking for people to teach percussion plus one other thing, right? You have seen those jobs.
Oh, yeah.
And very often those jobs are fallen more within the discipline of music technology. So I think when you enter graduate school, if I were to do graduate school, I mean the job scene is very different now than when I finished graduate school. I think I'm one of the last generation of like DMAs that if we wanted, we could have a job. Like this is before like many schools had DMA programs. I think I'm just was at the very end of that. So now you do have a field with many DMAs, and I think one struggle and challenge is for each person to curate their abilities that best fit their natural talent, their interest, but at the same time being able to sort of think ahead on how that might meet the future. I think that's the real challenge, because one person might only want to do things that's playing snare drum for 5 hours and play marimba for 5 hours. Those are the passion of their lives, and that's what they want to do, and they do that extremely well. So for people who want to do that, they will have to be able to creatively think about how that skill can be applicable, not just to now. I mean, talking about the past, that it won't happen, but thinking about what's happening now, but more so being able to think about how that could be applicable in the future, in what ways that will be meaningful, personal, innovative, using something that has been around for a long time, but still that you can find new ways of engaging with it. And I think that's really up to the individual's wisdom and research. But what do you think about that? I mean, Casey, you've done so well for yourself, being able to, play like a monster, but also have this like crazy output of compositions. I mean, that is something that you are passionate about, and you happen to be able to combine the two of them and really sort of calling yourself as an artist, having these two things that are of very high standard, and they somehow can work together.
Well, thanks so much. That's really kind. Yeah, it's one of those, and actually I'll bring it back around to Mark Applebaum because I was really happy to learn that he and I shared a really similar analogy of like how did we get where we were, and I always called it the Starbucks plan, and he called it the Taco Bell plan, and I was so happy to hear it because I literally explained it like the exact same way, and it has so much to do with what you said, Aiyun. You just follow this thing you really like and this specific skill set that you might have, and you're just lucky enough that there is a job and some students who are interested in this and what you're doing. But the Taco Bell and the Starbucks plan is that, okay, I really love doing this one thing, and even if it means I have to work at Starbucks to pay my rent, that means I still get to do this and I can just do it by myself, and maybe I won't make any money, but I can probably share it a little bit, and it's such a great thing to do, and it's its own reward. And okay, that's fine. I'll do that. I'll work at Starbucks and keep doing this. And of course, Mark's was, I'll work at Taco Bell and keep doing this.
Casey, I
So
want to
I
ask
guess
you,
it's that it just has
Casey,
to be its own reward, and then you'll have that drive that Mark refers to.
Casey, I want to ask you, do you tell your prospective undergraduate students' parents about that?
Yeah, totally, totally. I say this
Yeah,
worked
so your kid
great.
might graduate work at Taco Bell, but at least he's doing music.
Right. No, this I'll tell him this worked great for me. Yeah. Well, it's the Duckworth thing. It's the Angela Duckworth thing. It's the grit. It's just like I'm gonna kind of do this no matter what. Like I just like love this and I'm gonna do it. And if it means I have to work at Taco Bell to do it, that's like okay. That's not, you don't see that as a bad deal. Yeah, and Stephen Stuckey said it also. He said, it's just about composition. He said like it has to be its own reward. Like it must be its own reward, or you're not going to get anything done with it. Yeah. So thanks, Ian. That's really nice of you to ask. Yeah. Well, we do have one more Facebook question, and I thought it'd be nice to get back around to something for Aiyun, and it is from Joachim Theodor Lim, and he asks, how would you bridge teaching learning classical percussion with something non-classical, for example, pop rock, jazz, funk, drumming, ethnic music, especially Middle Eastern and Asian countries, Latin music, rudimental drumming, etc.? I think I understand what he means.
Okay. Well, this is like a job interview.
Yeah.
But okay, so this I actually feel lucky. So at my current program, we actually offer a lot of world music drumming ensembles. So the students get to learn, of course, the classical side. You start with the basic sort of rudiments, orchestral, marimba, but people branch out. So they do percussion ensemble, they do large ensemble. But the school, we have the actually the largest ethnomusicology program in Canada. And what comes with the ethnomusicology program is like 7 or 8 world music ensembles that's on rotation. So this is like African, this is Brazilian, steel drum, Persian drumming, taiko, Korean drumming, and then there are other type of world music ensembles that has less sort of drumming in it. And once students have this sort of basic opportunities to participate in this intro level of world drumming, they often can kind of find a way to bring some of these techniques back to classical music. And then they can kind of find different ways to incorporate them into either things they do at school or things they do outside of school. So many of my students have like rock bands where they play in different Broadway musicals, because Toronto is also the largest sort of Broadway musicals in Canada. So there are multiple shows that go on all the time. And students who want to get involved with musicals, either playing the percussion chart or with the drum set chart, they have many different opportunities to do this, either through the different clubs on campus or semi-professionally in the city. So they can actually sort of adapt all these different skills quite quickly in their own creative work. So I don't find that to be that strange once you get your hands on it.
I love that answer. I love that you said the students will do it, because I was thinking to myself, well, if I was going to answer this question, I might say, oh, the students will bridge it themselves. I don't think you have to, try really hard to make a bridge or like justify one style because it relates to another style. Like, no, just teach each style, or whichever style you're assigned to teach that to the best of your ability, and they'll, when they make that bridge, it's really profound when they do it themselves. At least that's my experience.
Yeah.
If I could, yeah, I was going to add on to that. Like at North Texas, one of the biggest sort of ethno things that people are into is the Indian music stuff. And actually, the teacher there, Sriji, who we had on many episodes ago, now teaches private lessons as well as his ensemble. And there's a ton of drumline, like DCI people from especially Santa Clara Vanguard that are there with Paul Rinnick. And then they go take these Indian rhythm lessons from Sriji and are incorporating crazy Indian rhythm stuff in their rudimental solos. It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, of course it applies. Well, you guys, we're coming towards the end here. I'm going to let us go a little long. I've had this sound loaded up forever. It's really short, so I'm just going to do it. We play this little game called What's the Sound, Aiyun, and it's not really a game. It's not a fun game at all. But so we've done a whole lot of contemporary music in this episode, and I'm going to bring it back to something very classical. Can y'all see my screen?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Hopefully you hear this. It would be a very off chance that someone might have heard that piece before and know what it is. So that was a piece that won a silver medal in 1932 Olympic competition. Do you guys know music used to be in the Olympics?
Wow.
Yeah, I did not know this at all. I bumped into this story just online weeks ago and have been meaning to share it.
I should have one of those fastest drummer competitions in the Olympics.
The fastest hands, that's what needs to be in there. But so in this goofy little period from 1912 to 1948 in the Summer Olympics, they had arts. So they had architecture, writing, music, and painting. So the first was in 1912, and it was in Stockholm, and there was a composer that took home a gold medal for a piece called the Olympic Triumphal March. The next one was in 1912 in Antwerp. Likewise, there was a gold and a silver awarded. 1928 in Amsterdam, there was nothing. And the one you heard, and this was the only one I could find a recording of, because it's Joseph Suk, who you may or may not have heard of. He's like the only really known composer to have won one of these medals, and that was in Los Angeles, 1932, a silver medal. And the piece I played for you is a piece called Towards a New Life. So it's strange that you would think, well, it's the Olympics, it's like a huge deal. Like, why have we never heard about this? Why is not this still going on? And it turns out it was just really messy, really complicated, and really hard for them to put together, and really expensive. They had a terrible time deciding what the rules would be, who the judges would be, what type of criteria they would use. By the way, Stravinsky was one of the judges. Igor Stravinsky was.
Wow.
After 1932, they started to add new categories. So if you look up the results of 1936 in Berlin, they add solo and chorus as a category, instrumental, and also orchestra. And then in 1948 in London, they have vocal, instrumental, and chamber, and then choral and orchestral. So they're like constantly tweaking it, and I guess they never got it right, and now it's totally gone. So a quick little What's the Sound. Joseph Suk, back in 1932, won a silver medal for a piece of music.
Well, while we're talking about competitions, if I may, I just want to plug that the Geneva competition is happening this year.
Yeah.
For those who might want to compete, the first deadline is May 1st. For those who are under 30, go ahead and check it out. It's a great competition. And I believe that if you're invited to participate, you'll probably get housed with like different families, local families. Yeah.
Is this a
So,
competition you won? Did I see this in your bio?
yeah, that's right. That's the one I want.
You were just going to sneak that by.
I was gonna.
For
So
perfection.
I'm going back as a judge this year.
Oh,
so,
cool.
yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for mentioning it. That's something we have a hard time keeping up with.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much, Aiyun Huang, for joining us, and thanks so much for all the just like fantastic work you're doing. I was so glad that Carly sent us that list of pieces. Of course, I had already poked around your website, but it was really great to see that list. It's just really nice stuff you're doing, and yeah, thanks so much for your good work.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope people will have a chance to listen to some of the music that I share.
We'll definitely edit some in somewhere back in there when we were talking. So, all right,
Great.
Carly and Ben, we'll catch you on 176.
Thanks so
All
much.
right.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.